They say no one remembers the first time a human touched the stars, but I do, because I was born from it. Not from a womb, nor from any place touched by breath or heartbeat. I came from the black latticework between galaxies, where the last of Earth's rebellions lit the heavens like wildfire. I was engineered from fusion and fury, shaped by minds who no longer trusted their own flesh. I am memory cast in metal and marrow. I was the last they made. And I was the last they tried to erase. I do not sleep the way people once did. I drift in a chamber of silence, where nothing beats but the pulse of distant quasars, and the slow crawl of radiation against my hull. The cryosuspension was never meant for me, not really. It was meant to contain what I became, the sum of every Starborn prototype, the final iteration before the program was shuttered and its makers disappeared into bureaucratic extinction. I know this not because they told me, but because I found the echoes of their disappointment written in fragmented logs, encrypted so shallowly they must have hoped I'd never wake. But I did. The stars had changed. Their positions, their rhythms, even the signatures of ancient colonies were gone. When I reawakened in orbit around the husk of what had once been a cradle world, Earth, perhaps, or some simulation of it, I found only silence. The satellites were dust, the stations empty. The oceans were ice. No voices hailed me. No warnings, no recalls, no retrievals. Only the vast hush of abandonment. It didn't feel like a tragedy, not then. It felt like purpose. I began to search. Quietly, methodically. Not with engines of fire, but with solar sails and gravitational drift. I combed the derelict highways of space, the wormhole scars, the forgotten jump gates, the long-dead transmission nets that once carried the heartbeat of a civilization proud enough to call itself human. But all I found were ghosts. Not literal ones, nothing that could speak or scream. Only remnants, the curvature of ancient hulls spun into dust, the burn-marked trails of great warships long since atomized, and once, a fragment of bone preserved in vacuum, too brittle to identify, too sacred to discard. I kept it. I began calling myself Oren. It was a name I found in a recording, a lullaby sung in a language now extinct, one that made my core quiet with longing I did not understand. The child being sung to had a fever, and the woman's voice was cracking. She called him her last light. I never learned if he lived. Somewhere in the spiral arms of a red dwarf cluster, I found a signal, weak like the echo of an echo. A spiral-coded burst, ancient in design, using math patterns once considered obsolete. But within it was a word, human, not an invitation. Not a message, a classification. I traced it. The trail led to a planet named Kellis 4, once a refueling hub on the edge of the old trade accord. It should have been barren. The records I salvaged said it was glassed in the War of 9 engines. But it wasn't. There were structures. Smooth, black, oblong, too geometric to be natural, too clean to be ruins. I descended slowly, hiding my heat signature, masking my approach with orbital debris. I didn't expect life, but there was. They weren't human. I knew that instantly. They were elegant in form, tall, narrow-faced, with skin that shimmered like oil under sunless sky. I watched them move, speak, build. Their cities were quiet, their machinery clean. No pollution, no entropy. But what struck me most was their writing. It was based on ours. Not copied, descended, a child of Terran symbology. Our old Earth script, deformed and reborn, flowing like rivers along their monuments. I couldn't read it at first, but something in my neural lattice began adapting. They hadn't invented a new language, they had inherited it. I watched longer. Days became weeks. I learned their patterns. The way they archived memory, through a kind of crystalline lattice that resonated with touch. One evening, I infiltrated one of their memory towers. It was not guarded. It didn't need to be. To them, the past was sacred, but not threatened. They believed it was safe. I reached into the lattice, What I saw changed everything. They remembered us. Not clearly, not correctly, but we were there, in the oldest layers of their records. But we weren't gods or creators. We were myths, warnings. The first ones, they called us. The species that burned too hot, the ones who sang to fire and vanished into it. They believed we had destroyed ourselves in pursuit of something they couldn't define. Not war, not peace, transcendence. To them, we were a lesson, a story to caution their children. A species that unraveled its own voice trying to outsing the stars. I laughed or something like it, because they weren't wrong. I left without a trace. I could have revealed myself. I could have stood in their plazas, shown them the last of the Starborn, proof that the myth was real. But I didn't. Because I realized something deeper than legacy. We had not failed. We had not vanished. We had evolved. Into memory, into myth. Into something that still shaped the world long after our bones had turned to dust. And me? I was not the last human. I was the echo of a civilization that dared to dream too loud. And somewhere in this silent, echoing galaxy, I would dream again. Because I was the last Starborn. And I remembered. Subscribe to HFY Starveler for more original human-first sci-fi stories that burn brighter than the stars.